Mary held onto the solid oak doors. Chips of old wood fell from them when she gripped her little fingers around the pockmarked edges. She had always been fascinated by the monastery, and now she was peering into its stained glass belly. Entering the cross-shaped part, she passed under the rood, startled by her own shadow even though she was already 11 and no longer afraid of monsters under her bed. Still, the air was stale in here, and the dark limestone walls made the belly so dark. There were 4-foot-tall tapestries of men who fight for the good. The monastery echoes this cry to be humbled, frightened, and awed by something other. Mary's soul feels unquiet, as if there was a certain level of anxiety bubbling up from below. She looked up at the Mother Mary draped in blue and holding onto her child, Jesus, and beneath her is the man himself hanging from the cross, nails pounded into his flesh. His head, crowned in thorns, fell over to the right shoulder. Mary watched other people bending down on their knees to release somehow the guilt that they have found gripping their hearts. She felt small and disgusting standing there underneath such depicted sorrows. For a long while Mary stood in front of the altar, studying the bleeding wounds of Christ until the fear and agony no longer held her interest. Her taste for the macabre started young when she was first told by the preacher that she was born with the original sin Jesus took away. But before his sacrifice, she was born filthy, destined to mess up in many ways. Mary was told to grovel at the feet of the Lord who saved her from even more suffering upon this earth, even though she was not really sure why she should feel guilty before she had done anything wrong. In fact, life had been good to her, and she was happy. She never felt sinful before. Rather, she felt free. Yet here in this monastery she was made to feel ugly for the first time in her life. Trying to escape the uncomfortable feelings the space brought out, Mary often enjoyed hiding herself among the small cruxes of the monastery, usually where there were little enclaves off to the side to pray. Sinking down on the burgundy velvet cushion, Mary kneeled like the other people she had seen, waiting for some kind of sign, but nothing ever came. She got up with a child's fervor and ran down the south aisle of the interior, her footsteps echoing quite loudly for such a small-framed girl. But Mary came to a halting stop, covering her hand over her mouth to scream, when she suddenly came face to face with a grotesque-looking gargoyle. It sat atop a column, staring straight at her with its lolling tongue and grinning mouth, full of sharp teeth and eyes that resembled a cat's. Her nerves twisted even tighter when she breathed in the musty cloud that another person had recently kicked up from the floor. It was so hard to see through the cloud of dust that Mary felt trapped in this large place that was so cold and dark it made her heart freeze. Still, to scream out in that place was probably the most embarrassing thing she could imagine doing. No one made a sound in there. Surely if she screamed at all, she would be beaten by one of the monks. The monks there all looked the same. They all wore white robes, many of them with a black scapular over their habits. They were all men who were bald or balding. Most of them had the palest of skin, and some of them wore glasses. Mary could tell if a monk was approaching simply from the sound of their footsteps, which were always slow and measured. Even the old people visiting the monastery never walked as slowly as these monks. They were frightening people to young Mary, for they always had a serious look on their faces and wrinkles that formed around their brows from all the contemplating they did here in this tomb. Some day, maybe when she was older, she would come to understand what it was they were always contemplating. What exactly were they looking for, she wondered. For now, Mary scurried off away from the scary gargoyle to the other side of the nave to look at the rude screen. The screen was made of wood and was intricately carved, so intricate that it must have taken 1,000,000 years to carve out all of those parts, Mary thought. Her parents told her that in the Middle Ages the carved wooden screen would separate the altar and choir from the nave. It was the separation between the outside pilgrims wandering around and the inner space of true worship. The altar where Mary and Jesus hung was the most sacred place in the monastery. Oh, how Mary longed to reach up and touch Jesus' wounded foot to see if some of the magic would rub off on her. But those items were too high for her to reach, plus she knew a monk would catch her in the act in an instant, so to compensate she turned to touch the pews, the cushions, and the pillars of the monastery instead. She pretended that the armchair-carved animals were her pets, and that the portraits could hear her when she spoke to them. The monastery began to feel like a living, breathing thing. To Mary, the most gorgeous part of the place was a stained-glass rose window at the center of it all. The circular eye illuminated the inside of the otherwise dark stone walls brilliantly with its reds and blues. The limestone pillars absorbed the light that came from every sunrise and sunset.